A sudden break. I function rather well. I work hard at my career, have 2 amazing college-age children, and an amazing wife. She is a fantastic role model, even though she isn't a supermodel. I will count myself lucky if my girls end up just like her. In addition to being my playmate and financial advisor, she is also my partner and the greatest lover a man could ask for. To put it simply, I had come to terms with the fact that Susan was simply too good for me a long time ago. Over the years, a few friends and I have formed the small habit of meeting at a nearby pub on Wednesdays after work. We get together for some male bonding since we don't all work at the same place. This implies that we shoot pool, have a few beers, fix all of the world's problems, and engage in a good deal of BS. Though a woman might not find it amusing, we are excited about it. Men would comprehend. Susan is cool with it, which is a terrific thing. She gives me the freedom to do it, though she has no idea why it has become something I look forward to so much. She's a wonderful wife, as I mentioned. I normally get to the pub before the other guys because I leave a half hour early. I have to get some wings and set up the table by the pool table. It functions fairly well for us. Just as I was enjoying my draft beer, I noticed a blonde glancing in my direction. I gave her a nod and moved to the table I planned to take. I attempted to recall if I had previously seen her there as I moved. She was the kind of person you would not forget, so I decided she had to be new. She was quite pretty, thin, nicely dressed, and in her early 30s. It was rather deserted. The post-work mob was 30 minutes away. In order to be warmed up and prepared to win back some of my quarters from the men when we played later, I made the decision to play a practice game. Just as I was about to lose it, the blonde approached me, her hips swaying with each stride, and began a conversion. "Would you be interested in playing with me?" she said. "That sure sounds like fun." I smiled. "Let me put this pool stick down." That's just how quick-witted I've always been. I wondered if she would scoff or get upset and go away. I wasn't really bothered by it. She leaned over the table and said, in a hushed voice, "That sounds like a great idea. You look like a man that knows how to play real well." This was what the devil was all about. I am aware of who I am and how I appear. I'm not the kind of guy a beautiful woman 10 or 15 years my junior would pursue, but I'm okay. She couldn't have assumed that I was wealthy because I was wearing my job attire. I was joking around, I stumbled to say. I am a married man and really am not allowed to play, unless it is with the wife. The blonde questioned, "Well, she isn't here, is she? What she doesn't know won't hurt her, will it?" My mind was ablaze with whistles and alarms. I wasn't going to be a fool, there was something in the old woodpile. My spouse is an amazing woman. Having said that, if I ever bothered, she would chop off my balls and shove them down my throat. You could say that fear drove my actions, but I like to see it as common sense. I could never be foolish enough or inebriated enough to ruin something truly amazing. There was an overpowering rat odor. It made me reflect on the peculiar circumstance I had just found myself in. What did she actually want? Why me? How could I discover that I wasn't as foolish as she appeared to believe without her knowing? I was then spared. My mobile phone rang. "Hi, Mitch." The voice on the other end said, "This is Don. I will be late by around 10 minutes. He smiled. "Dude, practice up so you won't lose all your money." "I see. All right," I replied. I turned back to the attractive blonde and resolved to carry out my freshly devised scheme. My pal was that person. He asks me to take him to the hospital since his wife is in childbirth. "Could I give you my cell number or have your number?" I inquired. "I think it would be quite nice to play a game or two with you." She appeared to pause for a split second before deciding. She went, "Give me your number. I'm going to give you a call. Make sure of it. Sandy is my name." I smiled my biggest at her as I scribbled my number on a napkin. She folded the napkin I gave her and put it in her purse. I told her, "I'm Mitch," and quickly made my way to the door while grabbing my jacket. I got into my car and headed to a convenience store across the street. To keep an eye on the bar I had just left, I parked. I was aware that I might be squandering my time, but I had none to spare. I noticed the blonde leave the bar not even 3 minutes later. I was pretty sure she wouldn't linger around because I knew she didn't belong there. I was unaware that she was accompanied by a tall, bearded man. They got into an SUV and drove off the property. I trailed after a few automobiles, merely lingering long enough to take a picture of the license plate when they came to a halt. I then pivoted around. I returned to the bar before the guys showed up. I told the men my story as we were playing pool. For once, it was nice to have a small puzzle to solve. The guys came up with a few clever suggestions. Don worked as a state police dispatcher. "Give me the plate number and I will see who the car belongs to, Mitch," he said. "Any guy turned down a young, hot blonde needs all the help he can get." The remainder of the evening was characterized by that. Jokes about my dread of Susan and what she would do to me if she ever caught me fiddling around were directed at me. Since I knew every man in the room respected Susan and was envious of our connection, I genuinely liked the jesting. Men tend to talk a lot, but deep down we're softies who need a lady who will discipline us. It gives us a reason not to engage in foolish behavior. It feels like when you were a child and your parents were observing you. Some choices that you actually don't need are removed. I got a call from Don the following day at work. "Mitch, Derek Baxter is the owner of that vehicle. He manages a detective agency of some sort. He is 56 years old and wed. He must be doing rather well because he resides in Westport. I'm grateful, Dawn, I said. I have to wonder why he has an interest in me, though. Dawn paused for a moment before saying, it appears that he specializes in what he refers to as marriage faithfulness checks. I inquired about him with a few of the troopers. They said that he essentially seduces married guys into becoming adulterers by using some attractive ladies. Even if he wasn't an adulterer before, he becomes one when his ladies break up with a male. Although they have never really had sex with the guys, they go to great lengths to demonstrate, usually to the poor guy's wife, that he will be disloyal if given the chance. He always provides his client with video and still images as proof. I was taken aback. Was it Susan who hired a setter for me? Why, it was nonsensical. If she had the slightest suspicion that I was disloyal, she would probably do it and throw my balls out the back door. Susan didn't seem like she would waste time or money hiring a detective. Dawn observed that I remained silent. The troopers informed me that because of this individual, they have been called to several domestic confrontations. If my sister were to marry a goddamn pimp, I would prefer that to this guy. Buddy, is there anything more I can look up for you? That blonde mentioned Sandy as her name. Dawn, will you please ask your contacts if they have any information about her? I inquired. Dawn said, sure thing, Mitch. In the next day or so, I should have the dirt on her. I hung up and thought about the circumstances. Susan just didn't mince words or make excuses. She knew me well enough to know that asking would be enough. I didn't keep anything from her. Talking to her seemed like the easiest course of action. I said, I had a blonde hit on me yesterday, as soon as we were having supper. Really? Susan chuckled. It must be your charm and good looks. She made it pretty clear that she wanted me to sleep with her, I continued. She was around 30 and very attractive. Susan yelled, where the hell was this? She had stopped laughing. I was waiting on the guys to arrive so we could play pool. She made a move on me shortly after I walked in the door, I said, seeing Susan's response. What precisely did she say and do? Above all, Mitch, what the devil did you do? Susan asked. I knew the answer. Susan had no knowledge about the girl. She wasn't acting angry. I gave a detailed explanation as it happened. After that, I informed Susan of Dawn's findings. She cried, that is low. They really put a bimbo in front of a guy and tell him he can have her in an attempt to persuade him to cheat. That would be like slapping a child for eating a cookie that was left in front of him. I was relieved she had that perspective. Men who are devoted can nevertheless be seduced. That kind of temptation shouldn't be presented to a man a wife loves, in any reasonable opinion. After talking it over, Susan and I concluded it had to be more of a divorce ruse. And it was an awful one, too. Susan, I've been wondering who might want to destroy our marriage. I admitted that this didn't sound like your style. However, these people are not amused by this behavior. Someone wants to use blackmail or split us up. They would be disappointed because I have 2 college-age children. Susan cursed, that jerk. It was probably Sam Longo. He's been putting a lot of effort into getting into my pants recently. To him, he is a gift from God. I wouldn't even consider giving the guy my time. He has been telling me that my spouse most likely has a side relationship with a woman and that everyone cheats. I think I will have a little chat with that guy, I said. He has gone too far. You ought to have informed me about this. Yeah, and have you get all mad like this and kick the crap out of him and get tossed in jail, said Susan. Mitch, I knew how you would handle it. Even though I adore that about you, I also know it would be extremely harmful to us. We don't have to make the girls feel bad about us or make headlines. Though such choice has its attractiveness, it needs to be handled more intelligently than with fists. If you have a better idea, tell me about it, I replied. I refused to let it go by. That's something you can count on. I am a vengeful detective agency that specializes in destroying relationships. Susan said, that is not an area where society needs help. That was the start of our adventure with the cloak and dagger. We strategized and plotted far into the night. By the time we were done, we had devised a thrilling, if slightly erratic, plan. Sandy called me the following day. Not surprisingly, I was excited to put our plot into action. She said, hello, Mitch. My name is Sandy. Do you remember me? Of course I do. I melted. You're the hot blonde with the nice tits from the bar. That girl would have hung up on me then if she had been a woman at all. Though I was setting the trap, I never spoke to ladies like that. She could enter with grace and leave, or she could walk right in. She laughed. I guess you do remember me. It sounds like you have given some thought to getting together with me. I have, for sure, sweet cheeks, I answered. Just tell me where and when. I agreed to meet her in the downtown hotel at 8 the following night, and she gave me the room number. I then gave Don a call to see if he could provide me with any information. Baxter appeared to enjoy unwinding with a few drinks at the same hotel where I was scheduled to meet Sandy. He actually used the hotel bar just as much as, if not more than, his workspace. His business was located half a block away. It dawned to me that they most likely had cameras installed to capture the evidence of adultery and were renting out a room on a permanent basis. In reality, Sandy was an attorney. It was rumored that she profited handsomely from the fidelity service. Approximately 2 years prior, she tied the knot for the second time. Susan and I honed our plans that evening. Next, we proceeded to the identical hotel that Baxter utilized as his operational center. We decided on our plans and reserved a room on a different floor from where my date would be. After we completed our survey, Susan grinned and said, "Hey, big boy, how about I practice my seduction techniques? I fear my memory is a little rusty." We ended up staying the night together and experiencing some of the most intense bonding I can recall. We were both extremely aroused by the thrill and audacity of our plan, and it showed. Susan always gave me everything in bed, no questions asked. She could be brutal on me when she felt it was necessary. Throughout our marriage, I never felt that she didn't respect or love me. Early the next morning, we got up. At work, both of us had reported sick. Susan had scheduled appointments to have her nails, facial, and hair done at a salon. I bought a decent digital camera and gave it some practice. Although I had always desired one, I never imagined that I would obtain one for the covert purpose that I did. Susan and I got picked up around midday, and I was pretty much speechless. Her hair was styled and clipped. Her cosmetics looked flawless. I managed, "Susan, you are a very beautiful woman," while the other women in the salon giggled. "You look fantastic." As I assisted Susan into the car, she grinned broadly. She grumbled that someone would see that I had her hands all over her before long, but she made no serious effort to stop me. We went to this fancy boutique where Susan tried on various outfits. I knew we got the one we wanted when she walked out of the dressing room in a short, red dress with a low cut. Her body was on show, and it looked amazing. A man could not look away from her. After purchasing the dress, we had a late lunch. While eating, we talked about our plans. "Mitch, I'm going to be pretty bold if this Baxter guy decides to bite the bait," she questioned. "Are you sure you can handle it? We have never done anything like this, and our marriage means more to me than this half-baked plot for revenge." "I'll be right there, Susan. Don't do anything expecting me to cry uncle. If I can take it no longer, I will just stop. I'll put up with as much as I can." I replied, "I want to get this prick." "All right, my love. Regarding this, we both agree. When it's over, we won't be angry with one another." Susan questioned, "It's something we have to do, and we'll do it, right?" I raised my cup. With a smile, Susan placed her glass next to mine, and we each took a sip. We proceeded to the hotel and ascended the staircase, which was situated at an angle. Nobody would perceive us that way, we thought. The third story had our room. Susan and I discussed our plan, after which she went to the restroom to get dressed. I tried to kiss her as soon as she emerged and seized her in my arms. She yelled, "Stop that. I recently completed all of the repairs. All you have to do is wait." We then stood there staring into one another's eyes. I was staring at my 22-year-old wife when I felt a lump in my throat. She continued to be rather captivating. Grinning, she reached for her purse and headed for the door. "Let's see if anybody else thinks the same of me," she sneered as she shut the door. It was approximately 4:30, and that's when Baxter usually made his way to the bar at the hotel. Susan was going to try her hardest to entice the wretched bastard to our room because she knew exactly what he looked like. All I needed to do was wait for them to take some photos that would prove my guilt. I had assumed my work would be easy. I pictured Susan making out with Baxter while I waited. I thought about other men observing her and purchasing drinks for her. I started to question my wife's judgment for placing such a lovely person into an uncontrollable scenario. While I waited in that lonely room, I must have made at least a dozen decisions to cancel the whole event. Every time, I convinced myself to hold out for a few more minutes. When I heard the door rattle, I was about to give up and head to the bar to save Susan. I hurriedly entered the closet and bided my time. "Oh, Derek," Susan chuckled. "I believe you purposefully made me consume too much alcohol. Did you know that drinking makes me naughty?" "Not at all, Susan," the bearded snake answered. "You're just laid back. That woman is lovely, and I enjoy that." "Derek, do you think I am beautiful, or just beautiful for a woman my age?" pushed Susan. "My dear, you are stunning regardless of your age, which I doubt is all that much," seemed aged and silky. He embraced Susan and gave her a passionate kiss. "She needs to get it from me." She really appeared to be an eager participant. After that, he spun her around and carefully undid her dress. I saw another man undress my wife, and for a moment I almost forgot why I was there. When the zipper was fully open, Susan grinned, took a few steps to her left, and turned to face Baxter. We determined that location would provide the finest vantage for taking pictures of the seduction. She was pondering. That made me think about using the camera. When I bought the camera, I had already finished my assignment. I had ensured that it was silent and that I could snap photos indoors without the need for a flash. I also made sure there was no blinking light in front of it that could attract someone's attention. I started taking pictures since I had a memory card that could store well over 100 images. Susan was approached by Baxter, who carefully removed her dress from her shoulders. Then I recalled the strategy. I swiftly looked through Baxter's pockets after gingerly removing his jeans into the closet. I discovered his cell phone and a room key. I hastily double-checked that the phone was off, tucked it and the key into my pockets, and carefully put the clothes back on. I looked back at Susan and Baxter and saw that I didn't really need to be careful. He was running his other hand over my wife's gorgeous derriere, and he was pulling down Susan's thong. With that vision in front of him, he would never have noticed a train passing through the room. I've never seen a man dress up that quickly. Running for the door, he never had time to lose his phone or key. Then he vanished. I came out of the closet. After pulling up, I took a few more photos of my wife seated on the bed with a different man. Mitch, when he came, I was about to chuck him out. I took off my shirt and undid my jeans as I was speaking. Susan only perched on the bed as I undressed. You've heard me. Get cleaned up again, I said. Why are you still here? I want you to take your pants off so I can see if you are angry, Susan said with a grin. There is one sure indicator hidden in there. We had the best time ever connecting as soon as Susan got back in bed. Susan looked hotter than I had ever imagined. I had not become much colder. As if there was no tomorrow, we made love. We didn't last very long together. It was too intense to last for very long. I glanced at the time and computed that we had been in bed for 30 minutes, even though it felt like seconds and years. I had a date at 8, and it was almost 7. I put on my clothes fast. I set up my laptop in the bathroom and connected my camera to it as Susan attempted to reassemble herself. I set up a little printer and printed off a couple pictures of Susan with Baxter's nefarious behavior. She brought it to the desk and urged the girl to make sure Mr. Baxter got it as soon as possible. She sealed the deal by giving the girl $50. I brought my laptop and printer to our car as she was checking out of our hotel. We had made our cash payment for the hotel in advance. That night, in order to avoid the necessity for identification, we had to tip the man working at the counter. He could see quite clearly that Mr. and Mrs. Smith were just a couple having an extramarital affair. Next, we ascended to Baxter's chamber and took a closer look. The 2 hidden cameras in the room were easy to locate. In reality, it was a suite with a control center with monitors and consoles in the room next door. I unplugged every gadget I could find. Subsequently, Susan entered the closet bearing my camera and grinning broadly. I descended to the lobby and waited behind a large plant, out of sight. When Baxter arrived by himself, the girl at the desk summoned him over. He moved to stand with the wall behind him and took the envelope, opening it. It seems he was not pleased with what he witnessed. After shoving the photos back inside the envelope, he approached the desk once more. I observed the girl respond to one inquiry, then wave her head for the next. Baxter dashed out onto the street. Sandy arrived at the motel at 8 minutes to spare. I spotted her scanning the area, most likely in search of Baxter. She took her phone out of her pocket and made a call. Since Baxter's phone was in my pocket and switched off, I knew she couldn't get in touch with him. She was searching the bar and putting away her cell phone as I approached her. Hello, baby. I said hello. Sandy gave a startled leap. Let's ascend to the chamber. I'm very excited. I informed her hurriedly. She was a professional, but I could see she was a little worried. With a smile, she extended her arm to me. As anticipated, Sandy looked around the room as soon as we walked in, searching for any indication that Baxter was present. When she saw that the door to the neighboring suite was ajar, I swear I saw a smirk. She turned to face me, flashing that radiant smile of hers. So, she started, Mitch, you want to sleep with me in this room, right now? She was so forthright, it astonished me. Then I understood that it was almost a done deal by the time a man arrived in the room. I had no issue giving her the idea that I was a little uncomfortable because I was nervous. Susan and I had already agreed that Sandy was not attempting to test my faithfulness if she was prepared to go to great lengths. Her task was probably to establish beyond a reasonable doubt that I was unfaithful, or that I was very much inclined to become so. It was my responsibility to ascertain whether she wanted proof of my infidelity, or to ascertain my fidelity. There was a noticeable difference, more than that. Now that you ask, Sandy, I'm not so sure. You know that I am a married man. I would never do anything to put that in danger. However, you are an extremely attractive woman. She made an effort to hide her astonishment, but I knew that 99 men out of 100 would have made it clear they wanted to have a sexual relationship with her, and she would have her evidence. But she was a soldier and she was only looking for her salary. I calculated the amount of money she and Baxter made from these frauds and found it to be quite high. Mitch, you cannot mean it when you say you are unsure. She asked again. You came up here to sleep with me, didn't you? I really detest betraying my spouse. I was aware that Sandy believed she lacked sufficient evidence to establish my deception. I was aware that she had made thus far as well. She understood that she would never get another chance if she gave up without finding success right now. Okay, Mitch, I'll give you a little look, if that is what you need to decide, Sandy said. Sandy, I notice that you wear attractive bras, but my wife also wears them. I told her, I'm not sure I am willing to cheat on my lovely, devoted, and caring wife. You also appear to be hesitant. Perhaps I ought to visit my wife at home. I pretended as though I was about to rush the door. My side was facing Susan's concealed closet. I realized that in order to succeed in undressing Sandy, I would need to sway her in the direction of the closet. No, Sandy was about to yell. I'll take off my bra if it means so much to you. Well, Mitch, what are your thoughts? Shall I try? She inquired. Do you want to sleep with me? Slowly spin around for me, Sandy. I gave the command. I want to see them from every angle. Sandy turned slowly and gave me a feeble smile. She paused and turned to face me. As of now, you and my wife Sandy have a similar appearance. I said, I'd better be sure if I'm going to do something as horrible as cheat on my wife. take off the rest of your clothes." After giving me a quick glance, she cast a sidelong glance in the direction of the unrecording camera. When her eyes found me again, I nodded, and she started to unzip her skirt. She was before me shortly, wearing a little thong. Admittedly, she looked fantastic. "For God's sake, Mitch," she begged, "would you like to share my bed?" Even after all this, she continued to view me as a sheep that needed to be sheared. I watched her consider the possibilities. She sat on the bed and returned her attention to me. I approached and took a position in front of her. She grabbed my zipper and dragged it down. "You know, Sandy, I just don't think having a sexual relationship with you would be worth the risk." She sprang up and bolted into the restroom, and I almost felt bad for her. Susan reached my side as I zipped up my jeans. She hit me in the ribcage with a pretty firm punch. "You jerk," she shouted and hushed. "Let's get the hell out of Dodge." We laughed all the way across the lobby and down the elevator. We watched Baxter get out of a taxi as we made our way to the parking lot. We had recently completed on schedule. "Jesus, Mitch, did you have to let that dumb bimbo suck you off?" she said with a grin. I apologized for the pun, but I felt like it was the cherry on top. I've never felt more attracted to someone. It was really sweltering. The black kettle is called by the pot. When you had old Baxter in your mouth and hands, you sure as hell seemed to believe it was a good idea, I shot back. "I knew you were coming after me for retribution," Susan remarked. "Mitch, you are so shallow." As soon as we entered our home, I paid my due since I am an honorable man. By the end of the night, Susan was way ahead of me, if the truth were known. We were winning against Baxter and his cunning apprentice. When their spouses saw the material in our anonymous report, their lives would become an absolute nightmare. As we lay in bed together, Susan thought, they should be used to that by now. They have experienced those circumstances on the other side numerous times. They should take a mile in someone else's moccasins for benefit. She came to me and smiled, laughing, and said, "I have already come up with a plan to teach that Sam Longo not to mess with our marriage." Sunday was the following day. Usually around 9 a.m., Susan and I would have a light breakfast. We would frequently take a leisurely journey to see her parents after that. While dining, Susan was discussing her strategy for exacting revenge on Sam Longo. As the brains of the fidelity test that we had so deftly reversed, he was the only person we had any leads on. The doorbell went off. To say that seeing Derek Baxter on my stoop astonished me would be an enormous understatement. The slime ball said, "Mr. Hardison, could I please have a few moments of your time? I have come to negotiate a deal with you and your wife." I held the door open and answered with confidence, "I think I already have a pretty good idea what you want. I guess we can listen to what you have to say. I believe this hand has all of the cards. You're used to not actually playing the game, but rather acting as the dealer. Does it not feel as amazing as it does now? It goes without saying that I'm in a very difficult situation right now, Mr. Hardison. I'm here for that reason. I'm hoping we can come to an agreement where we benefit both parties," he said. Susan arrived into the living room from the kitchen at this point, intrigued. Her jaw fell as she saw Baxter and pulled her robe closer to her throat. Beginning with "Good morning, Mrs. Hardison," Baxter said. "You look gorgeous as always. I must congratulate you on your acting skills. Admittedly, I am ashamed to say that you totally tricked me. I should have known that a woman as lovely and fascinating as you would never discover me. I was equally as stupid as every mark I have ever come across with evidence against. I'll take that as a compliment, although coming from you, it isn't going to be the highlight of my day," replied Susan swiftly. "I did manage to get cleaned up after you left the room yesterday, in case you're interested." Susan's remark caused Baxter's face to flush deeply red. Her remark had been meant to minimize his performance, and it was exactly that. Few men desire to come seen as weak or inept. If a man in his profession could have any pride at all, it had been wounded by Susan's zinger. "I had that coming, no pun intended," Baxter said, grinning gloomily. "I won't take up any more of your time, I'll get right to the point. Of course, I would prefer that any photos you may have of me be deleted. Additionally, please remove every picture from your camera and any other device it may be on." "I'm sure you would," I said, a little taken aback. "You haven't given us a reason to accept your suggestion. We think that we did not break any laws, at least not that can be demonstrated. It feels like we have the upper hand in this situation, Baxter. Will you attempt to purchase your way out of this situation? If so, I can save a ton of time for both of us. We have no interest in it. We'll exact our revenge since you came here intending to piss all over us. Mr. Hardison, I thought you would be interested in knowing who hired me to put you up." "If I were you, I would want to know," Baxter declared. "Huh," Susan exclaimed without humor. "We already identified Joe Longo as the prick. You can tell your client that as soon as we've finished taking down your life, we're going to wreck his." Susan's rage astonished me. It seems that she was more offended by Baxter and his shady business than I had thought. There was no place for cunning, cruel people in her society. Marriages gone awry wasn't high on her list of priorities. Longo Sam. That name is completely new to me. The man who employed me was not local. "I doubt you've ever met him or know him," Baxter worriedly said. "I'll give you his name and his cell phone number in exchange for all the incriminating evidence you have against me." Susan was obviously taken aback by this statement. Baxter, sit here while I discuss this possibility with Susan in the kitchen, I said. We'll only be a few minutes. In fact, Susan and I debated our next course of action for a good 15 minutes. At last, we made a decision and went back to the living room. I said to Baxter, we have decided to accept your offer, but there are a few requirements. You'll first provide us with all the details you know about this client of yours. You'll do all in your power to assist us in exacting some sort of revenge on him. And lastly, your shady company will be permanently shut down. We shall erase any evidence against you if the outcome of this case leads us to believe that you have fulfilled your half of the bargain. Accept it or don't. I accept, Baxter said out of the blue. He clarified after noticing our astonishment at his quick and total surrender, saying, I made a vow to myself that if I ever managed to get out of this situation without ruining my marriage, I would retire and move south with my wife. Your offer exceeds my wildest expectations in generosity. Baxter told us what he knew about his client in a few minutes. It wasn't really much. After he was finished, we appeared to know less than when he started. Hoyt Cashion was the man who had gotten in touch with Baxter. He and Baxter had only met once. He had an accent that Baxter assumed was Texan, and he was dressed in Western attire. He had said clearly that he expected some very speedy results and had paid cash in advance. The second intriguing detail was that he desired for Baxter to receive the same benefits as Bill Vance. Bill was raised on the farm that was adjacent to my parents' land. He was my junior by a few years. As children, we had engaged in numerous games of basketball and baseball, and in later years, we had gone deer hunting together frequently. My father passed away a year and a half after my mother 5 years prior. Though no one in my family had really farmed there since I was a child, I now own the family farm as the sole child. Bill mowed the hay off the meadows and kept dairy cows in our pasture. Both parties benefited since it prevented weeds and briars from spreading over my property. I gave Bill permission to use the land as he had done during my parents' lifetime. In the steep hills of northern Pennsylvania, my family's 200 acres bordered Bill's 450, giving Bill the chance to truly earn a living via agriculture. Susan, looking shocked, questioned, do you already have pictures of Bill acting inappropriately with your little woman, Sandy? Bill Vance's late marriage to Susan was the reason she was taken aback. A little more than a year ago, we had attended his wedding to a girl from New Jersey. Within the next month, they were expecting their first child. It's true that Sandy didn't get along well with Mr. Vance. He is rarely seen leaving the farm or his spouse's side. Baxter verified that Sandy made several attempts to talk to him at the neighborhood coffee shop, but he showed no interest at all. I don't think Mr. Hoyt Cashion will be very happy when I tell him of my failure there. Let's talk about this and get together with Bill and his wife, Susan exclaimed. He can cooperate with Sandy long enough for it to appear professional. You will see some photos of Bill and Mitch with Sandy. After that, we hand them over to this Cashion guy so we can see what the devil he wants to do with them. Since we're all in on it, he won't really be able to blackmail anyone. Cashion simply won't be aware of that. I'm afraid that won't work, Baxter said in a composed manner. Sandy left me a voicemail this morning. She announced her resignation. She expressed quite clearly that she would never want to see or speak with me in the future. She didn't even try to justify her hurried actions. Oh, Susan moaned. I'm worried that Mitch and I may have been involved in it. Not only does she not know that we have some images yet, but she must have been pretty upset at the way things happened yesterday. It seems like my enjoyment of ruining you two is waning really quickly. I don't see how we're going to find out why this Cashion dude wants to get the goods on me, I complained. We'll just have to wait and watch if he tries another approach. I simply dislike waiting for him to pursue me or Bill and not knowing what course of action he would take. All we need is a sexy woman to be in a few photographs with you and Bill, said Susan. Bill's wife is too pregnant to pose for any pictures, but I can think of a volunteer if you think she's sexy enough. Who do you have? Oh crap, I let out a gasp. Susan, you're going back undercover, so to speak. You'll be able to persuade Bill, I wager. His spouse might require some convincing. That was the origin of Susan's most recent epiphany. After we had discussed the matter with Bill and his wife, Baxter consented to wait for our call. We concluded that photos taken in Baxter's hotel room would make the most sense. It was, after all, precisely why he had rented and furnished it. Cashion might become suspicious if we changed our location. Bill agreed to meet with Susan and me later that afternoon when I called him. He was genuinely intrigued by my refusal to divulge any information over the phone. Bill greeted us and said, "You remember Amber, don't you?" as he led us inside his home. "She's gained a little weight since the wedding, but it looks good on her, doesn't it?" Amber, who was incredibly pregnant, shook our hands. She had a large smile and a little red head covered in freckles. Susan didn't take long to describe our goal. We were required to respond to a great deal of inquiries. "You're telling us that you want to be photographed with Bill in crazy poses, Susan," replied Amber. "Do you really believe that the photos will make this would-be extortionist reveal his hand? Why is he pursuing Mitch and Bill? They don't really share anything other than this property here in the hills." "That's exactly why we have to flush this guy out, Amber," Susan replied. "Would you rather watch and see what shady plan this guy comes up with next?" In this case, I'd like to take the initiative rather than react. Furthermore, we won't really take any crazy actions. The pictures will simply seem that way. We talked for an hour, and then I contacted Baxter to arrange to meet later that night at his hotel. Especially in the photos with Bill, I couldn't help but wonder just how much Susan would be revealing. Being quiet and reserved, he would likely feel quite ashamed if Susan revealed more information than the bare minimum. Bill embodied the quintessential rural farm lad. When I opened the door for Bill and Amber, they smiled apprehensively. While Baxter was busy setting up his video gear, Susan was getting ready in the restroom. Baxter offered to explain how this usually works when Susan comes out. I've been doing this for a while and I'm very good at it, but I'm not particularly proud of that. Just do as I say. Simply stop if you feel uncomfortable at any moment. We ought to have enough evidence to work with by then. Susan entered the restroom as the door opened at that precise moment. Everyone fell silent. She had on a short black dress that accentuated her legs and a dark wig. The problem was that her dress was cut really low, exposing most of her, so nobody would be staring at her legs. It never occurred to me that Susan could be that cleavage. Amber, I didn't want to come across as disapproving. Simply put, I wasn't expecting Susan to look as hot as she did. I said haltingly, I didn't mean it looked like a hooker's dress. It's ironic since Bill used to refer to it as my working girl clothing. I've never been brave enough to wear it out of the house. At least early in the evening. I believe I may have been wearing it the night I became pregnant, chuckled Amber. While Baxter discussed his desires with Bill and Susan, he made Amber and me enter the restroom. It was quite easy. They were supposed to act like a couple who were going to share their first ever bed. I thought they could pull it off rather well in that role. For Baxter's objectives, it would be more believable the steamier they were. Baxter informed them that Cashion had expressed his desire to have sufficient evidence to unambiguously demonstrate that both Bill and I had cheated on our wives. Susan pretended to be pleased that Bill was looking at her amazing globes once more. I was gasping for air when I saw Amber standing over a kneeling Bill, her huge tummy propped up on his head and her lips locked to his. He tongued his wife while holding her in his hands. Amber trembled and seemed to melt into Bill, so much so that he had to embrace her in his arms. Beneath a sly smile, Baxter said, I think we should have enough to convince Cashion that you gentlemen will not want your wives to see what you did here today, as he entered the next room. Susan muttered, good. I don't know if I could do that again, at least for a day or two. We were all on our way home shortly. After delivering the images to Cashion, Baxter had promised to get in touch with us. Then all we could do was wait and see what Cashion's blackmail plan would get him from Bill and myself. I reasoned that the most difficult aspect of the plan would be the waiting. As promised, Baxter got in touch with me after work the following day. Things were moving forward far more quickly than I had anticipated. Mitch, Cashion wants me to come see you as soon as possible so I may show you the photos. I'm here to persuade you that sharing the photos of you and the woman, as he referred to her, with friends and family will wreck your life. Then I have to arrange for you and him to meet in my hotel room as soon as feasible. Gosh, that was quick. When is he hoping to get together with me? Have you gotten any indications about his intentions? I asked Baxter a question. No, I'm not aware of his ultimate goal. 10 minutes before to your arrival, Cashion requests that I set up a meeting between Bill and himself. That does not seem like a long time to do business of any kind, let alone blackmail, allowed Baxter. He also instructed me to have the woman there before the two of you showed there. He must believe that having her there at the conference will make her threat to you more real. I had not anticipated that. Why meet so close together, Bill and me? Was Susan going to be anywhere near this guy? What if everything became ugly? I had always been able to hold my own in fights back in school, so I knew this Cashion was annoying me. Additionally, I had witnessed Bill in action shortly after he graduated from high school. That summer, it was at the county fair. He had heard a couple of guys make fun of his mother. It never occurred to me that two mature guys could be eliminated so quickly. Bill was well liked by the local sheriff, who knew him. After hearing the tale from a few witnesses, he simply assisted the two criminals in stumbling out the door and let them go. It was justice done. If this Cashion had slept with Bill, he would have committed a grave error. That night, I told Susan, Bill, and Amber about my concerns. Susan urged that we meet with Cashion to learn more about his evil intentions. Bill had the same resolve. We needed to finish what we started because, as Amber acknowledged, we had come this far. We had Baxter schedule the meeting for the following afternoon in spite of my reservations. I went to the room that Baxter used as his control room and knocked on the door 10 minutes after 5. It was a component of the suite he hired out for his infidelity service and marriage. Although Baxter had already informed me he wouldn't be attending the conference, he had consented to let Cashion use his room. Sue was told to come 20 minutes early for my appointment. Bill was scheduled to arrive 10 minutes ahead of me. Sue and Bill had not left while I had been observing the elevator. A pretty huge, swarthy fellow ushered me inside the room as the door opened. There was a man in Western attire sitting at Baxter's desk. The moment Bill took a seat across from the guy, I could see the perspiration on his brow. That worried me, as did the fact that Susan had vanished from view. "Hardison, come in," yelled the man I took to be Cashion. "I'll stop you from wasting time by playing cat and mouse. Let's get right to the point." He gestured to a chair next to Bill as he was speaking. I looked at Bill questioningly as I sat down. In response, he just shrugged. I'm interested in a property that you two possess. He laughed and said, I want to make you an offer that I don't think you'll be able to reject. I want all of your mineral, oil, and gas rights to these properties signed by both of you. I will kindly pay you each $100 per acre in exchange. You guys can figure out the math on that, I'm sure. Hardison, you are going to get $20,000. Vance, you're going to get $45,000. Since neither of you is particularly affluent, this money will be helpful during these trying times financially. Are we in agreement? That was the main purpose of this, then. For the past few months, I've been receiving emails from natural gas corporations requesting to lease my land for gas exploration. Since their usual offer had been $50 per acre for a 10-year lease, I had been ignoring the mailings. It also contained a 12.5% royalty, as required by law, on any gas that is sold from beneath my land. Although Cashion was willing to pay much more than that, he was only interested in buying the ownership rights to the minerals, oil, and gas rather than leasing them. I carefully answered, Mr. Cashion, I have to say that you are making a very interesting offer. However, I have a few misgivings. The first is the whole cloak and dagger thing. If you're offering a good business deal, why are you trying to blackmail us with material? The other issue is that I never sign a legal document without first getting approval from my law company, Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. Haddison, there's the rub, grinned Cashion. I rarely get a lawyer's permission for my suggestions, and I don't have the time or interest to even try that path. Before you both leave the hotel this afternoon, I expect you to sign. Bill snarled, Cashion, you seem pretty confident about that. I won't sign anything because of your mindset alone. You are aware that what you did was an attempt at extortion, blackmail, or both. I was afraid you might not be cooperative, so I've taken steps to ensure your signatures, Cashion replied. Both of you are married men. It would be unfortunate if something were to happen to your wonderful family. If you think those pictures you have of us with that woman will sway us, you're badly mistaken. I swiftly retaliated. All we were looking for was the nature of your game. Your pitiful little trap isn't effective. You damn hick, Cashion growled. If you think I'm stupid enough to try to blackmail you with pictures of your own wife, you're the dumbest person on the planet. I started to worry now. This guy calling me a hick is dressed like a freaking cowboy. He also labeled me naive. He was aware that Susan was my spouse. In any case, where the devil was Susan? Look at this monitor, shit for brains, Cashion commanded, flipping the screen to reveal it to me. That's Tony the horse Caputo, my sister's child, chit-chatting your wife in the adjacent room. Tony will either show her how to ride in cowgirl fashion or you'll sign that deal. I glanced at Bill, then shifted my focus to the monitor. Susan was seated in the single chair in the room, holding a wine glass. A large man with dark skin and casual attire was seated on the bed's edge. For some reason, his smile made me really angry. The man, who I supposed to be Tony, nodded and got up as soon as Cashion pressed a button on the desk. With a tap of a key on his board, Cashion brought audio from the adjacent room into our view. Susan and I both gulped in unison. Bill, let's go get that girl the heck out of there. To my astonishment, Bill stayed seated as I began to get up. What on earth was the issue with him? Why wouldn't he want to jump to Sue's defense? Bill was observing me from behind. He then gave a nod. I looked up to see the dark-haired goon that Cashion had sent after me brandishing a gun. Susan could certainly manage a huge guy, I thought quickly. Bill pushed back, saying, Do you think you'd have Vinny here? Shoot us. He lacks the courage to shoot a man. For heaven's sake, he's still wet behind the ears. It's not like you two are awful dudes. You are phony individuals. Bill was thinking, what in the world? Why would we question a man brandishing a gun at us as manly? All I could hope was that Bill's Vinny wasn't a hothead. In the movies, these individuals were always cool-headed and collected. Insults did not work. Vinny yelled, You dumb hick. Have you heard about the 2 Jersey City undercover officers from last summer? Who, in your opinion, dust them off? Like I did to them, I'll drill a hole in your head if you say one more thing. Cashion commanded, Shut the hell up. I promise that neither Tony nor you are smart enough to be my biological family. Just keep these two seated so they can see what your brother Tony does. Tony had pulled Susan from her seat by grabbing a fistful of her hair. In one swift stroke, he leaned down, grabbed her brand new red dress, and tore it off her entirely. Susan was suddenly kneeling in front of the weirdo, wearing nothing but her panties. She should have worn more modest underwear, in my opinion. Tony effortlessly reached into her bra, released the clasp at the front, and yanked it out of her body while she was still gripping her hair. All right, Cashion. We'll sign your blasted papers as I observe the events, I moaned. Show us where, and we'll sign right now. Bill shot back, I don't think so. As I looked twice, wondering if this was really Bill or some kind of extraterrestrial pod creature. This is completely forbidden. Why try to get us sign something that we know won't hold up in court? Telling the cops what you made us sign is all that is required of us. You'll spend years behind bars. That is a cause for concern, Cashion said. But after Tony is done with her, Hardison's marriage won't be the same. He will take care of that. And there's your extremely pregnant wife, Vance. If she were to suffer an accident of any kind, it would be quite unfortunate. She might even die from it, as well as your unborn child. I was done listening. My attention was drawn to movement on the screen. Tony was making fun of Susan while slapping his club all over her face. Would you like this? We'll sign. I nearly let out a yell. Bill, you want nothing bad to happen to Amber, and I for one absolutely do not want Susan taking care of that crappy natural phenomenon. Just sign, and let's get going. Cashion, let me put it straight. Bill questioned softly, as if he were in diction class. You're telling me that you'll hurt Amber and our unborn baby if I don't sign that agreement? You really are a stupid guy, Cashion chuckled. Exactly what I'm saying is that. I thought the other man was dumb, but you've got him completely beat. If you don't sign this now and keep your mouth shut afterwards, your family won't survive the weekend. What on earth was Bill waiting for? Upon glancing at the television, I noticed Tony had lifted Susan and leaned her against the chair. Our room's door seemed like it was blowing up inside out. I looked over to see what was going on, right before it crashed into the room. Vinny lunged for the opening with his rifle. After hearing multiple gunshots, Vinny fell to the ground. There was a lot of shouting. I realized very soon that the attackers intended Bill, Cashion, and me to cover our heads and stay motionless. We complied right away. They were at least 5 in number, and they showed less regard for our safety than I thought was appropriate when they waved automatic guns at us. They tied us after swiftly yanking our hands behind our backs. We were then looked through. I wasn't shocked when they extracted a handgun from Cashion's waist. It appeared to be a Magnum. He obviously has plenty of firepower. I had no notion what had really transpired because everything had happened so quickly. Things started to make sense with time. Dark uniforms were worn by every gun-wielding man. They conversed through their timepieces. They never grinned. They had to be officials. A tall, gray-haired man who seemed somewhat familiar entered the space. Stepping over Vinny, he glanced at him as he was splayed out on the ground. Then he turned to face his 4 prisoners who were arranged along the wall. Tony was occupied with puking on the carpet. The operation's apparent brains commented, "Good job, Bill," and turned to talk to one of his men. "Please release Mr. Vance and the other 2 right now. They were employed by us. We had been. I was unaware of that." Susan gave me a glance that told me she had no idea that we had joined the fight against crime. Bill, on the other hand, was beaming broadly as the tall man shook his hand and took off his handcuffs. "Gratitude, Uncle Mark. I must admit that for a little while, I was a little anxious. All I was hoping for was that I had given you enough information to lock these men up for an extended period of time." Bill laughed. "I guess this wire worked pretty good, huh?" "Yes, son, it really did. We have everything we need to accuse these 2 of murder, extortion, blackmail, and a ton of additional crimes that I can't even begin to list." Then he remarked, "Mrs. Hardison, would you like my jacket?" Turning to face Susan. The first person to be uncuffed was Susan. Before my hands were even released, she was making a valiant attempt to remove my shirt. All she'd managed to do was roll it up around my hands, which were behind my back, so that the agents would have a hard time getting the key into the lock. "Ungrateful, sir. Since the person I married won't give up his clothing, I'll take you up on your offer." Susan put her arms into the supplied garment and replied, "You'd think he'd want his wife properly covered while surrounded by so many virile law enforcement officers." The tall man was actually Amber's uncle, it found out. We'd seen him at Bill's wedding, so he appeared familiar. He was an elite FBI agent. Upon presenting our half-baked plan to Bill and Amber, they promptly contacted her uncle, who arranged for Bill to be wired for our appointment with Cashion. After pursuing the man for a number of years, the feds were relieved to obtain the evidence against him at last. Eventually, the reason Cashion felt compelled to press us into selling our mining rights so rapidly was revealed. Word slowly got out that our region of Pennsylvania contained enormous reserves of natural gas that were locked a mile or so below the surface. It was found in the Marcellus Shale, a black rock that was formed ages ago. Some local landowners signed gas leases for as little as $25 per acre for 10-year terms early on with holding companies and energy companies. The offers grew in tandem with our growing awareness of what was beneath us. Bill and I signed leases for $2,800 per acre for 5 years with 17% royalty 6 months after our near experience with Cashion. Bill and I had both signed our deeds with the names of our wives by now. I'd always been too busy to get around to accomplishing that one of those things. Susan and I were paid well over $500,000 for our lease, even before any gas wells were drilled on our sites. In an instant, Bill and Amber became millionaires. Cashion's bid to purchase our mining rights appeared extremely low as a result. Susan and I went out to a fancy restaurant for supper on the day we got our gas leasing check. We carried on the party in bed when we got home. We were really fortunate, Susan. The FBI's raid was precisely timed. It might have been a bad dream. It's fortunate for you that they broke in before Tony could get all worked up over you. My comment: first of all, he shouldn't have put Susan's name on the deed. Too much money involved and he wasn't looking carefully or listening carefully to Susan. Subscribe if you enjoyed this short one and I'm starting on the next one.